Hello friends, welcome to this video. Today I have hopefully a fun and interesting one for you all. At least I'm pretty excited to talk about it. Today we get to talk about my favorite character in Project Copper so far. Now if you're not familiar with Project Copper, a quick rundown. There are 2 other videos for this series on my channel, and basically it came out of the idea that I and many others, including several, I think, who watch the videos on this channel, we really like dragons. That's pretty obvious. However, there aren't a lot of dragon books that are written for adults. One of the main books that I've talked about on this channel, and the main book I think that has kind of brought a lot of us together, is Wings of Fire, but they are generally for a younger audience, like middle school, high school age. And I'm not middle school, high school age. I know lots of people are who like dragons, but I am definitely not in that range anymore. So I have kind of been wanting to write or somehow tell a story that is dragon focused that isn't for middle school kids or high schoolers or anything. Originally, I conceptualized this as Dragon Bridgerton because I came up with the idea while I was binging Bridgerton naturally, and it's really evolved into something that is hopefully a lot more complex, less romance driven, more political intrigue, magic, and just, I don't know, a little bit more serious with a little bit darker themes and stuff than Bridgerton. Basically, it's Wings of Fire for adults. Yeah, sorry, cutting to the chase there. Naturally, after a bit of rambling. Also, I'm so sorry if you hear some weird noises in the background that sound funny. It's Indy. He's chewing on one of his chew toys. He just really likes to chew while I'm recording because it's his routine. And, I don't have the heart to stop him. So if you hear anything in the background that sounds like banging or grinding or whatever, it's Indy chewing on a chew toy. Living it up, having the time of his life. So, okay, back to the story. Yeah, originally I wanted to write this story as a book because I am just a huge lover of fantasy novels, and I would love to read a book, like an actual book, like a book that was just all about dragons. And by the way, this society is like just dragons. Like there aren't humans in these books at all, ever. And I would love to read a book like that. However, I think the market for that kind of book isn't too large. Passionate, but potentially not super large. So I wasn't really envisioning this as a book that I could sell in the first place. So I decided, why not just write it anyway and share it on YouTube and have a great time collaborating with you all on ideas, the story, and just kind of sharing the overall process. So yeah, long story long, that is what Project Copper is. Yeah, and so far we've gone over 2 of the main characters of the series. The first character, originally named Kajani, I think, or something like that, but I have changed her name to Azrian. That is her name now. And we went over another character whose name was Kaelin and is still Kaelin. However, I definitely need to redo that video because his art is, I just need to update it, and I need to update his character because I had more ideas for him. But in any case, now we're on to the third character, the third main character, I think, and the third POV character, because dragon book for adults, complexity, and that entails hopefully some shifting POVs. I mean, you can't have like a political drama without shifting POVs. Like, that's where all the tension comes from. Maybe not all of it, but in any case. But yeah, so for the past month, I have been thinking about this character. His name is Rael, Prince Rael, actually. And he's kind of like the impetus of the story, a lot of it, actually. And he is so far definitely my favorite character. So I kind of went ham on his design and drawing a bunch of like different facial expressions for him, which you'll see later. But yeah, that's what I've been drawing for the last month. Just all him. And I think he also has like kind of one of the coolest stories slash POVs. So let's talk about it. And of course, as always, like while I'm introducing this character and stuff, if you have any ideas for some part of his backstory or some extra ideas for his motivations and stuff, totally feel free to drop them down below in the comments. I love like sharing ideas that way, and you guys always come up with such cool and unique ideas that in turn inspire me to have more ideas, and it's just like a positive feedback loop of awesomeness. So yeah, my basic idea for him originally was this like evil conniving prince from a neighboring country that wants to take over and kind of manipulate one of the other main characters, Azrian, into believing that like they're in love and they're going to get married or something in order to like take over her kingdom essentially, which, you know, that's pretty villain coded, I would say. But obviously things can never be that simple. So I was thinking about this character because, you know, I knew that he would be a beautiful dragon covered in feathers. He's very interesting. He's from a different country, which just makes him off the bat interesting to the first main character, Azrian. And I always knew he was going to be quote unquote evil and have these like intentions that essentially go against everything Azrian stands for. So like he wants her country. He wants to like either depose her or just rule over her country or go to war with them or something. But in the beginning of the story, he is masquerading as an ally, essentially. And that's kind of like how it all started in my brain. And then I started to think like, okay, so I have this, you know, devious, interesting character, because a lot of the themes of the story are going to be, you know, betrayal and stuff, which hopefully will be very fun and interesting. Like many levels of betrayal. That would be so cool. But obviously he needs a motivation. So does he just want her country or the spoils of her country for power, for money? Like, why is he doing this? And then I remembered, like, so also in my mind, he has always come from this desert kingdom. And then one day it just kind of clicked where, like, obviously his people are in trouble. Totally, I would totally understand if his motivations are purely for power. That would be great. But you know me, I always need them to have like a noble reason for things. I don't know. If it's a main character, their actions need to be justifiable so that everything is morally gray and we don't know who to root for. That is like one of my favorite things. So it started out as like, okay, so he's doing this specifically to save his people. So we have a dragon we're rooting for, Azrian, who, you know, like we don't want her to fall into his clutches, right? But then if we can also root for Rael, like that would be great for me because I love conflict as an author, which again, if you've listened to any of the other stories that come onto this channel, yeah, we love internal and external conflict and just warring intentions and all that stuff. So I started with this like flowchart in my little idea notebook, and it was like, okay, so we have this feathered dragon. His name was originally Tyr, but now it's Rael. Rael or Rael, it's Rael. Also, like, I just need you to know that like I'm nervous saying this stuff, like, because I like him so much and I want you guys to like him as well. So like I need his motivations to be like good. But this is the exact point where like, hey, if you have more ideas, let me know, because I want him to be like the villain that we also root for, and it's just gonna be so horrible watching them both like struggle. So yeah, that's the end goal. Okay, so I initially wrote like feathered dragon, let's make him complicated. Why does he want Asrian's kingdom? Wealth, arable land, not desert potentially. And then a drought has been beating them down for the last 12 years. Half of Tyr's life. Tyr is Rael, actually. So he's old enough to remember when dragons didn't die for lack of clean water in his country, but his little brother is too young to remember that. So he knows that their people deserve better, their people used to have better. His brother deserves better, his little brother, but his little brother just thinks that's normal, and that's really heartbreaking for Rael, actually. And I also wrote this that the little brother questions these impending schemes to create a war because he also doesn't like he doesn't understand that Asrian's kingdom is directly responsible for the downfall of Rael's kingdom, which I need to name. It originally was named Najar, but I want it to have a different name. But yeah, I need to think a little bit more about cause and effect here, but I know for a fact that Asrian's kingdom is related to the downfall of quality of life where they live, and subsequently his brother growing up not knowing what it's like to not worry about having enough food, having clean water, and just surviving. So Rael is full of rage as well, but his personality is very calculating. So he has, and he's not the king either. He is just a prince. And so he is probably one of the only dragons in his kingdom that can make this happen, that can make things better for them. And I'm sure his father, the king or whatever, isn't going to do that. So Rael has to take it upon himself, which actually might mean that he has to depose his father later. I'm not sure about that. Because our other character that is looking to depose Asrian and her family he's doing it for his father's approval. It's his father's idea, but for this side of the story, it's Rael's idea. He believes in his cause. He believes his cause is just. He believes that Asrian's kingdom deserves their downfall, and if Asrian gets caught in the crossfire, then, stuff happens. Tons of his people have died because of her people, so it's like the cycle of violence, basically. And I also thought it would be really interesting that his little brother, not necessarily knowing as much about the history of the two kingdoms, kind of always having tensions, and I think probably a lot of what has contributed to the economic downfall of Rael's kingdom is these potentially maybe these mines on the border are disputed, and Asrian's kingdom kind of took them by force, and they kind of just ignore the smaller country because they don't have as big of a military or something. I mean, they're desert dragons, so I don't know. I just always thought of them as a little bit more peaceful. And basically, Asrian's kingdom has taken their most lucrative asset, these mines that are along the border, and now their kingdom has, no money to spend on importing water and stuff. That's one idea that I had as far as Asrian's kingdom causing the downfall of Rael's kingdom. But yeah, that kind of brings me back to this idea of kind of burgeoning war, if that makes sense. We're setting up for a lot of conflict to happen, and Rael's brother doesn't really get it, and I wonder what it would be like if Rael's brother also kind of is against Rael's plans, and so there's kind of this sibling conflict and betrayal with that, potentially. Betrayal all around. You get a betrayal, they get a betrayal, everyone gets a betrayal. And I also wonder if in the past, Rael already feels betrayed by potentially Asrian and her people, because I'm sure before everything came to a head, he probably thought things were fine. And then it's almost like all of a sudden this other kingdom decides, like, you know what? We can actually crush you into the dirt, and that's what we're going to do right now. And you're going to watch your little brother grow up in not necessarily poverty because they are the royal family, but like definitely not as well as he should have grown up. Yeah, so in addition to being very full of rage and wanting revenge, Rael is a very calculating dragon. He's gonna do this in an underhanded manner, not just because his country doesn't have the best military assets, but also because that's just his nature. He likes to do things the smart way. It kind of also fed into his design, so he's not going to be the biggest, strongest dragon in court or at the mage school that they might end up going to. I'm tossing ideas around. So I kind of intentionally, in the sketch, I initially had him a little bit more muscular and bulky, and then I intentionally made him a little bit more lanky because also, I mean, for the past like half of his life, he has been struggling to survive a little bit, or if not struggling, then like he definitely has to work hard to survive. So I envision him as he is covered in feathers, so it's a little bit harder to tell, but he is very like wiry strength. He's not weak by any means because, like I said, he's kind of been hardened by the desert, hardened by, you know, trying like having to like work for his food, work for his water and stuff. So that also went into the design as well. Obviously, you can definitely be like big and bulky and still have an underhanded personality. However, I did want like Rail's like shape language basically to reflect kind of his personality and kind of evoke that sense that, you know, there's this like hidden strength and kind of slinkiness to him, if that makes sense. That's also why I kind of made his body a little bit longer, because he's slinky and sly. So instead of taking revenge by force, he is going to do it in a politically treacherous way, naturally. I actually wonder if originally I had Rael and Kaelin being kind of enemies, but I wonder if, because both of them are aiming to overthrow the current regime of Asrian's country that also needs a name. So I wonder if, like, at some point in the book, it would be really interesting if, like, Kaelin finds out or Rael finds out. Actually, probably Rael would find out because Rael, I'm thinking, is the smartest dragon of the cast. He's had to be. It makes sense. So he kind of finds out what Kaelin and Kaelin's family are planning and is like, I can definitely capitalize on this. Because if there's tension within the government, it just takes a little bit of spark to make everything erupt into chaos. And if Asrian's country is in chaos, that makes it a lot easier for Rael to, take over as well. So in this scenario, if we decide to go with this idea, he has to pretend to be friends with Asrian and also pretend to be friends with Kaelin. So he's got to be very good at acting, which I had already kind of decided that he was. He is very smooth. He is very calculated. He has his emotions like covered to a T. So I think it will be really interesting to write from his POV and talk about how angry he is at everything, but all he can do is smile. I mean, if you think about it, the first scene of the book as is right now is basically at a ball, like a dragon dance. And, Asrian and Kaelin are like, oh, court is boring, blah, blah, blah. We have to dance, whatever. Like, I can't wait to go back to school. Okay. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Just, I would be excited to go back to school. I don't know. But then to flip to Rael's perspective, it's like all of the like opulence that he sees just fills him with more and more rage, because why did they deserve, you know, all of this food and this gold and all of these just pretty things that serve no purpose but to look good, when his people are dying on the streets, you know? And his little brother is like a scrawny scrap of a thing because he didn't get enough food growing up, you know? And I think potentially an excerpt like honing in on just like the amount of food that they have there, and the fact that there's no way they could possibly eat all of it and it's just going to go to waste, and comparing that with, you know, what he and his family have had to fight for the last, you know, decade or so, that's going to hit pretty hard. But he's at court, right? He just has to smile and be charming, because the reason he's there is to make them think that he's friendly and to make them like him, so they'll invite him into their inner circle so he can understand what's going on in their politics and foment, you know, issues. So yeah, I also kind of just really like when there's characters that have to put on a facade of being, you know, upper class classy and upper class, you know, aloof, when inside everything is just boiling, you know? It's one of my favorite internal conflicts, I guess. And I think it should be interesting to not only write that from Rael's POV, that, you know, he just has to smile charmingly while inside he's on fire, but because this book it has multiple POVs, at least 3, I'm thinking. At least 3. Probably 4, actually. But we also get to see Rael and his responses from other parties. And what could also be potentially really interesting is different POV characters see different things. Like maybe certain characters like notice a slight tension in his shoulders, but other characters are just going to be like, oh, he smiled charmingly, blah, 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 blah. But yeah, this could be really cool. And I also wanted his design to kind of reflect this, you know, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of opposites going on in him. He wants to, well, actually, I mean, he started out as like the villain, but I want us to root for him. And he has to present a very cool facade, but inside he's raging. And also, he's supposed to be very calm, cool, and collected, and his personality is very calculating, but he is also very emotional. So he has like a constant war within himself to just like between screaming at the top of his lungs at the injustice of everything and then like, no, I have to do this smart or else it's all for nothing. I don't know. In any case, I also wanted him to be pretty, because that's kind of the initial like, oh, on the surface he's pretty, but actually his intentions are very bad. So he's the only dragon that the other POV characters have ever seen that is covered in feathers. They all have scales and he has feathers. So immediately he stands out, which I guess is maybe not necessarily good if you're planning a coup, but he's got to make it work, obviously. So he's covered in these like glossy iridescent feathers, and most of his colors are like browns and tans. And then kind of opposite the color wheel is the blues and cyans. So he has these like iridescent blue feathers on his crest and under his wings. And I tried to incorporate that. I couldn't like fully render this piece out as much as I originally wanted to, even though I gave myself a month. It's fine. If I had more time and more skill, the blue parts of his feathers are like iridescent, like blue morpho butterfly iridescent, if you know what that is. I can't believe that I'm already at the end of my footage. Oh my gosh. Okay, sorry. If you can't tell, I love him. I don't know if it came across super well in this video, but I want him to be so interesting. So if you have more ideas for him, please let me know. like little character quirks or backstory stuff, like, you know, maybe experiences that he had with his brother when growing up in the desert could potentially be cool. And also just generally, like, what would you guys think of a book that is just all about dragons, but it's written in a more like adult style? So the books are more complex, deal with darker themes, and are longer, layered POVs. I don't know, I think it could be really cool. Also, if you actually know any books that are all about dragons but are for adults, like where the main characters are dragons, let me know, because I'm sure I haven't read all of them, but I would like to. Okay, in any case, like I said, I can't reiterate enough. Give me cool ideas for him because I want him to be the coolest ever. I am really excited to talk about the next character and slash or potentially the like opening of the characters' relationships, if that makes sense, because I think I have an idea for how Rael and Asrian initially become quote unquote friends, so like fake friends, I guess. But this video is already way too long, so yeah, TBD. All right, I hope this has been at least mildly entertaining in any way. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. And of course, I appreciate any of your ideas or questions or comments about this. And yeah, I'll see you around.